Recording in progress. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to School of Speech, presented by SpeechTherapyPD. School of Speech is the podcast for school-based SLPs who want to learn boldly, think critically, and really stay grounded in the real work that we are doing in our schools every single day. I'm your host, Carolyn Dolby, and I am so glad you are here. You know, I talk about how much I love hosting this podcast, and I do. It's like what I think my favorite thing about hosting this podcast is it gives me an excuse to go down professional rabbit holes. And every once in a while, I'll be reading an article, looking up research for something completely different, and suddenly find myself thinking, wait a minute, this is really interesting. Why are we not talking about this more? And that's exactly how today's episode came to be. I recently came across an article by today's guest, Dr. Lynne Telesca. It's titled Implementing a Metalinguistic Approach to Secondary School Writing. And as I started reading, I found myself like highlighting, jotting notes, and I was thinking, I really need to talk to this person. I need to find Lynne because writing is everywhere in the schools. I mean, we do it in language arts, right? I mean, social studies, even in math, some, right? We have to write to demonstrate how we learn. I mean, it's just everywhere. I can't get away from it. So writing intervention, I think, for some of us can really feel murky as an SLP. We do know as SLPs that literacy and language are deeply connected. We know that our students with language difficulties often struggle with writing, but many of us are still trying to figure out what meaningful writing intervention actually looks like within our role as school-based speech language pathologists. So, as I was reading Lynne's work, one idea kept standing out to me. Well, if writing isn't an academic skill, it, no, if writing is an academic skill, how can we be supporting it? Right? So let's think about that. So I'm so glad you guys are here because this is what today is all going to be about. We're going to be talking about metalinguistic awareness, adolescent writing, language intervention, and practical ways SLPs in the schools can support our older students through written language. And honestly, I think this conversation might change the way some of us really do think about writing therapy altogether, right? So let's get into this by introducing our guest, Dr. Lynne Telesca. Sorry about that. Hi, Lynne. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Let me tell people about you. Lynne is an associate professor at the Communication Disorders Department at SUNY in New Paltz. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Oh,
SUNY New
good. Okay.
Paltz. Yeah.
Yeah. She has spent over 20 years teaching undergrad and graduate courses focused on language, literacy, and writing. Throughout her career, she has been passionate about helping clinicians connect research to practice by sharing evidence-based approaches that support thoughtful clinical decision making. And honestly, I think that passion is one of the reasons I was so excited about today's conversation because writing is one of those areas that SLPs, we know that it matters. We know how it's connected to language. We know our students need support. But many of us are still searching for practical frameworks that help us bridge that gap between language intervention and academic writing. So Lynne is joining us to share that approach that she has, and I can't wait for this. But before we get started, y'all, I know I've got a little bit of housekeeping. Sorry. All right. First of all, every episode of School of Speech is offered for zero point 0.1 ASHA CEUs through Speech Therapy PD. And we have a big live audience today. And if you are joining in live, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I want to make sure that you get credit for being live. So before the end of today, you will need to go back onto your Speech Therapy PD account and complete all of those course modules. All right, now just some quick disclosures, quick. I'm a salaried employee of Portland Public Schools here in Oregon, and I receive compensation from Speech Therapy PD for hosting School of Speech. Dr. Lynne has indicated that no relative financial relationships to disclose, non-financial, that she is, of course, an employee of SUNY, and I've already talked about that a little bit. So I can't wait. Let's get into this, right? First of all, Lynne, I love your article. And I meant to, you know what? I'm going to put it in the chat right now for everybody here. So you guys can all pull it up. Okay. Because as I was reading your article, it really stood out to me like how clearly you describe challenges that our students face when writing. And it made me wonder, what were you seeing? Whether it was like your students, teachers, broader research writing, what that made you think, wow, there needs to be another approach to writing intervention, right? Like maybe like what was the problem you were trying to solve? Bring us back to the beginning. Tell us your journey.
So when I decided earlier in my career, a lot of my focus was with younger children, so from
Hmm.
birth to about fifth grade. And then when I went back for my PhD, I really focused on the adolescent population because the more I researched and the more I read, there isn't a lot out there beyond even just first, second grade, what to do with kids at that age level. And I knew if I focused my work in that area, I would always have a place to present and to provide information for SLPs because there isn't a lot out there. When you start reading about kids anywhere beyond second grade, you realize that almost all of the assessment is something that is written. Something I would always say to my college students is we don't take oral exams for the majority of our, school education. So a lot of what kids are having to do, they're having to put in writing. You even mentioned math. I know a lot of states, when they do a math problem, they have to justify it in writing. So that's another piece of writing. And there is so much research out there for reading, which is just as important and will definitely overlap with everything that we talk about today. But there isn't a lot out there for writing, and everything that is out there is not written for the speech language pathologist. There's very, very little out there. So when I was going to focus on my dissertation, I decided, hey, let me do it on writing. And I was very fortunate in that this middle school allowed me to do the research actually in their eighth grade classrooms. And I actually went into eighth grade science classrooms and I did a very specific syntax intervention called sentence combining. But I didn't want to I wanted to make it very SLP-ish. So I was thinking, all right, what can I say and what can I do while we're working on the writing that's really going to tackle the language piece,
Hmm.
not just what we're talking about in the science, not just the actual writing mechanics, but what should the students be thinking about when they have to be actually putting those sentences together? And is there some way that I could say and do it that they actually make gains beyond just in writing the sentences themselves? So that's really where this came from, was
I
that.
love it. Yeah. Well, I like it when you're saying what they should be thinking, right? Because we don't just start writing. We got right.
Right, right.
Yeah. What are there? I love the fact that you are thinking of the SLP. Like this whole time when you're thinking about, let's think about writing, you always had the thought of this is specifically for SLPs. That's what I really love about that. Is there anything that you think that maybe school-based SLPs are misunderstanding about writing intervention?
Well, I think when I worked as an SLP, I always wanted to work on writing. And especially when you work in the schools, you're usually working with more than one
Like a group.
student with a group.
Absolutely.
So that's just daunting in itself because you are making sure you're targeting every single person's goal. So I wanted something that was very practical, that if you're working, even in sometimes I used to go into whole classrooms and do lessons. So I wanted to come up with something. And when I did the research, there was at least 20, 25 students in that classroom with me and the classroom teacher. So I
Hmm.
wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure it would work for groups. Um, the other thing is, I wanted to also make sure that the reality is when you're going to do writing, you still have to be targeting the language goals.
Right.
So it's very easy to, again, get absorbed into the actual writing process itself. I find most adolescents, especially the ones we work with, do not like writing. So you have to be doing it in a way that's very supportive and that you're kind of letting go over time. Because if you just say, okay, we're going to be writing this essay today, you're going to get the communal,
Oh.
right, exactly. So it has to be something that keeps them really engaged. And I also wanted something that, if while you're working on the writing, you realize there's something they're not understanding, that you could easily segue to explicit instruction, which would be more of what you would be doing during your therapy session anyway. And that would be part of that thinking process of what should be going on in the student's thinking process when they're writing. Because when you write, there's so much that you have to think about. You can't just write.
Right.
It's very different than talking. Talking's in the moment, it's in the context. If you make a mistake, you fix it right away. Writing is the complete opposite, especially stuff that you're writing for school. It's usually out of the context, and you have to be very clear and concise so that whoever then reads your writing completely understands what you're talking about. And there's so many different things that go into that in that process.
I think that kind of leads me to the question of what do you mean by metalinguistic awareness?
Metalinguistic awareness.
Mhm.
Yes. I'll tell you the reason why I focused on metalinguistics at all was, if you do look at any writing that's written specific for SLPs, almost everything that's there will say, it'll talk about metalinguistic awareness and metalinguistic skills.
Mhm.
But then it never and it'll say, okay, that means thinking about the language. Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense to me. Meta is brain, and anything meta is thinking. So then metalinguistic is literally thinking about the language. And it'll say, that's what you should be doing while you do this. And then the problem is no one actually says how you do it. What are you,
Ah.
there's no, everything I saw, they would tell you, okay, I did this intervention and this was the purpose of it and this was the results. And we did it very metalinguistically, but there's no script. There's no, well, what did you say?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did you actually say to the students? What were the questions that you asked the students? What did you model for the students? And that's why I wrote this article, is I really wanted to give a formula for that, so that whatever you're saying and doing, you're always targeting those skills. So metalinguistic awareness really is someone's ability to understand, okay, I'm going to communicate this. Now I'm thinking about how I'm going to say that. What words am I going to use? What order am I going to put it in? Why am I saying it the way that I'm saying it? So first, you just have to have an awareness that you have to even be thinking about that.
Mhm.
And very often, what happens with the students that we work with, um, writing is just something they sit, they want to get it done, and everything just comes out. And then they're just kind of hopeful that I convey the message. This is kind of like slowing down that process of, wait a minute, what are you really supposed to be thinking about here? What should be going on through your brain that then is going to come down on the paper?
I
So that's
like
really,
this. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think anyone explained that to me in when I was being taught to write. And so I feel like this is different than just teaching grammar or editing a writing piece. Right? I mean, it's like not that. So we're not talking about teaching that. That's for the teachers. This is really more about taking a language approach to this to writing. Um, and that's what I really love about your approach is that it doesn't separate language from literacy. I mean, it's like you can't even,
no,
right?
you can't. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a way of that writing I think it's a way of showing students that writing is a way to even strengthen language itself. I mean, is incredible. Oh,
Exactly.
it's powerful. Yeah, yeah. Um, because I think, when we think of like speech and language, we think it should always be talking. But I think we really do need to talk about the power of writing and why it is important for speech pathologists. Not only for us to think about targeting it, but what I'd like you to kind of talk about is what is the lens? You probably already kind of said it, but I think I just want to just hammer this home of like, what is the lens that the SLP is looking through when we're looking at writing intervention?
The thing about writing intervention is it is so intimidating at first, but there's so many wonderful things about it. The number one thing I always love about working on writing is there is an aspect of writing that's very static. It's the written word. So it is always in front of the student. When you're doing things that are only conversation, then there's memory pieces there.
Mm.
And when you have something in front of you that's the written word, the beautiful thing about it is they're seeing it. Okay, so it
Mhm.
just stays there. And the other thing is when kids write, you have data. It's there. You don't,
Ooh.
because then you have, say, even if they just write 2 sentences and that's your session, there's your data. And then you can collect several of them over time. And that's what I do in my dissertation is they would, write each time. And then there were some times where they wrote independently. And that's how I gauged success was from the beginning to the end. So that's the magic of writing that people don't even realize once you start to do it is you have immediate data. The other thing that's beautiful about writing is you have to read to write. You
Mm.
can't not read because when you're planning, and usually if we're going to be talking about adolescents, usually you're writing something, unless they're doing creative writing. A lot of the writing is more expository or more factual or
Mhm.
informational. So they're probably using a textbook or a worksheet. And I always encouraged my students to bring their schoolwork, and then we would always write from that. So then they're getting extra practice of the content. But in order to plan what you're going to write, you always have to go back to the reading piece. So then you're immediately working on reading comprehension
Mhm.
at the same time. Because it's an approach, and we're probably going to get into what the approach is, you're doing a lot of talking with this approach. So I think that the other thing that's always scary with writing with SLPs is, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? They're just going to sit there and they're just going to be writing, because there are parts of writing that should be quiet, but this really shouldn't be. It's a dialogue, and it's a think aloud where you're doing a lot of talking. So the benefit of that is now if everyone is talking, they're using the speaking process, they're
Mhm.
also listening, then they're reading, and then they're writing. So now you're using
Wow.
this
Yeah.
multimodal process. And the great thing is you have some kids that are much better with the listening, or you have some kids that are much better with the reading because it's in front of them. Because you have students that have weakness in working memory, you have students who might have attention difficulties, you might have students that just increase the levels of language is difficult for them. So by doing this and having the writing, the written word in front of them, there's constant. It's targeting everybody's strengths and weaknesses, and that's the best thing about it. So you don't have
I
to
love it.
feel like, oh no, I'm not working on language goals.
Mhm.
There's no way
Okay.
you're not.
Right. You're hitting all of them.
You're
Right.
hitting
Well,
everything.
all right. I think I'm so excited about this. So I know my listeners are too. They're like, okay, what are we actually talking about? What does it actually look like in practice? Right. Can we start by maybe walking us through what it would look like? What would the components of facilitating metalinguistic discussion?
Sure. So
Or from the beginning,
yeah,
I don't know where to start because I'm like,
yeah,
I want everything right now. Lynn, all of
Yeah.
it right now.
No, and the thing is, that's the great thing is that the article is written as a tutorial. So the beginning has a lot of background and foundation because it has to, and the journal requires that because um, they really wanted to make sure that everything that I was putting in there has a research base. So, I
I
mean,
love it.
I don't think there's a sentence in the article that isn't cited with something to back it up because there isn't a lot of research studies that people have used a metalinguistic approach. There are a few, and they're always positive.
Great.
But there's not a lot out there.
Okay.
But the majority of it is, okay, where do I start? So that's really where you're asking. The number one thing is for SLPs, you want to start small. This isn't something that, tomorrow you want to go in and start doing it with all your groups. You want to, maybe start with one group or even um, one student that you're working with. So you want to start small. The other thing is that you also want to figure out what level of writing are we talking about here? So is it just writing sentences, just to get your feet wet with kids getting comfortable actually doing writing in the therapy session? Or is this going to be a paragraph? Or is this going to be the 5-paragraph essay? Or is this going to be a science lab report? Or is this going to be a social studies compare and contrast document-based question? And these are all the different things that kids do in middle and high school. So you want to kind of figure out there. And I always say, find out what they're doing in class. You'll find out where they're struggling in class, see what the writing expectation is in class, and if you could do something similar to that, or even have them bring something they already wrote in class and bring it in and do it over and do it
Ooh.
metalinguistically so you can kind of see uh, where the breakdown is going to occur. So that's the first initial parts. You had also mentioned you were saying about editing
Yeah.
and revising. Okay. So the other big piece of writing, this would be beyond like the sentence level. So if it's someone who's actually writing something that they're going to submit, there's going to be different stages of that. And you can use this in any one of those stages. So the first would be actually planning writing. And a great thing to do with that is I know a lot of people use graphic organizers. Some school districts even have specific ones that they, double bubble maps and all
Yep.
these, different things that are out there, which are wonderful because again, now you're seeing it, now you're writing it. You could use a metalinguistic approach through all that process, that whole planning process. You could use it for the actual generating, the actual writing itself, putting the sentences together. And then you can actually use the approach to do the editing. Like, okay, now I'm editing. What do I need to look for? What do I need to be fixing? What did I forget? What am I checking? So there's a lot of decisions there, and you want to start small so that you do continue with this. So that's the first piece.
So if we're okay, let's start small with us. For
Okay.
example, start small with us. So let's say I mean, it could be just a sentence or something. How do you get started? What are some of the actual questions you're asking the students?
So the number one thing, and what's great about this is in the academic standards, is a lot of it is what and why.
Okay.
I always start with why, and even at the sentence level, why? Because I always explain writing as kind of like a powerful thing. I'm going to tell you something. I'm in control of that. What's the message that I want you to receive? What do you need to get from what this sentence is saying? And what pieces need to be in there in order to say that? Um, if it is a bigger piece of writing, what is in the academic standards, a lot of focus is what's called author's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very big part of the standards for older kids. So that really is the bigger, broader thing that you would be getting to is why am I writing this? What is the purpose of that? when you understand that, that's going to dictate the style, how you are going to write it. So, and you could even do this at the sentence level. If I'm doing like a once upon a time story, more of a narrative story, that's going to sound very different, or a sentence is going to sound very different than if I'm writing a line in a science lab, which is going to sound more factual. So really getting to those conversations of what do I need to say? How am I going to say it? Who's going to be reading this? Sometimes I like to even flip to more conversational language, slangy language, what you put in text message, what you put in email. Do we want to say it like that? Well, no, because the purpose of this is this, and the person who's reading it is going to expect it to be in this order and have these different pieces. The other beautiful thing about that, it's very pragmatic. And no one thinks about pragmatics with writing. Everyone thinks pragmatic is only a social conversational thing. Well, no, when you write, you have to think about who you're writing for. The reason why you edit is so that the person who reads it actually understands what you're trying to say. You know what you want to say, but you don't always, have the writing in correct order. So I love that because all the students need to be thinking about pragmatics on some level. So it's very theory of mind, thinking about what you're thinking about your audience, the reader, what, and I always say to kids, you're the writer. What do you want your reader to be thinking? What do you want your reader to be feeling? You're the power person. Adolescents like that a lot. And then, so that's really like the why and the who. Then the second part is the what, is the language. And when I start with a sentence, I do every aspect of a sentence from the capital letter at the beginning, which is a biggie. A lot of our kids who are struggling with writing as they get older, and even when I did my dissertation, which was with eighth graders, you would be surprised, even just capitalization, punctuation, uh, basic morphology, plurals, possessives, all that. And it's because you're thinking about so much when you have to write with the content, all the other language stuff kind of like disappears. I bring them right back to that. And as we're writing and, when I'm modeling everything early on, I make mistakes on purpose. What did I forget? Especially that possessive S, that's a big one. Okay, there's an S there. What does that mean? Well, I don't mean more than one. I mean that belongs to someone. And then you're immediately flipping back to those linguistic rules that they still need, or well, why do we need to put that apostrophe there? What does that mean? If I don't put it there, what is that telling the reader? The reader is going to be confused. So it goes from becoming this annoying thing that my teacher keeps reminding me that I have to do to something that's meaningful, and then reviewing the rule that was probably taught so long ago, maybe kindergarten, first grade. Now, why does that apostrophe need to be there? Why does that S need to be there? Why does that capital letter need to be there? Why does that period need to be there? Uh, the other beautiful thing when you stay at the sentence level, I go back to good old nouns and verbs. Do we have a verb here? What's the noun? Does this match? You'd be surprised, older kids, like, they forget those. They have to go back to those basic rules to be, because that's what you're actually thinking about when you're writing, is those different things. And our kids may not have mastered those concepts, or they have, but then when they're writing, it's just another thing to think about. So it's constant review. And then if they're getting it wrong, that gives you the opportunity to just segue right to explicit instruction. Okay, well, let's talk about when we do this and why we do this, and let's do a few practice ones. Okay, now let's go back to this sentence again, now that we went over that.
Hey, can I jump in a minute?
Yeah.
Danny has got a question here, and Bushra, I'm going to come back to yours as well. But Danny's, how do you bring joy and excitement to writing before targeting academic expository writing? Do you have them start with writing? Well, I think you started like start small, but I'm hoping you're going to say what I have in my head because you said it earlier. Um, do you have them do, I know you kind of start with planning and writing. Um, what do you do to bring excitement to it?
Um, definitely was the first thing that I said is I make it like a power thing. So
Yes,
it's
that's
it's
I love that because you said that they are in power, they're in control. I love it. Okay, thanks. Bushra said that you've already answered the editing one, so I won't ask that question. So,
That's okay.
um, yeah. But the other part was when you said about the difference between the social media aspect. Something popped in my head how funny that would be, as if, would you really send that to your grandmother? Yeah.
Or even
Bro.
more in this yeah, more in this context is um your science teacher
Yeah.
or your social
Yeah.
studies teacher. So um I joke around a lot and I
Yeah.
make mistakes a lot on purpose, and that usually gets them into it. The other thing is that when I start this, I do all the work first. So, and at some point I'll model how to like do a script or a discussion, but I make it that I model everything I'm thinking at first, and I always have a dry erase board in some capacity. So if it's not up in the room that you're in, you could always get the dollar version. Sometimes they have them at Target in the dollar section, or I love dry erase. I always have the students write on actual paper with a pencil. We always use pencil. Why? Because you're going to make mistakes. And what I
Mhm.
always say is famous authors like Stephen King have 10 editors. You know why? Because everyone makes mistakes.
I love it.
And that it's okay for them to be erasing. And I will purposely make errors and then be like, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I'm supposed to be thinking about. Why did I write that? And they usually, and then they love to correct. They love to correct me. So at first, I'm doing all the talking, I'm doing all the writing, and I let them write along with me, just write along with me. And then over time, I let them tell me what I should be writing. And then slowly they'll be writing by themselves. So they never feel that initial, oh, I gotta write this. I don't even
I
know where to
I'm
start.
not sure if I'm able to picture what you were just saying. Sorry. What do you mean when you say you have them writing along with you?
So, and this is how we did for dissertation. So, and here's a good example. So we were in science and it was compare and contrast. So we were comparing, contrasting different science concepts. And we were taking sentences and combining them and figuring out, are these two things the same or are these two things different? And then if I take these two sentences and put them together, what words do I need to put in there, or what punctuation do I need to put in there to either show it's a similarity or a difference?
Mm.
So to start that process, I would be speaking out loud what I'm thinking while I am doing that. And while I am talking, I am writing it on the board. And they're going to be writing along what I'm saying
Got
with
it.
me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then, we would actually dissect things like crosswords out, or we're going to put this word in. And at least they're never it's completely modeled and scaffolded slowly down to then them doing it independently, but I'm modeling everything, so they're whatever I do they're doing on the paper. All they have to do is follow along, listen, but they are writing with me, so they are
Mhm.
physically writing and listening and talking. And then what happens is as we go further along, then I stop talking so much and then I start asking, okay, well, what's next? What should I do here? This is something that's different. What word would I put in there? And the words we used for that were but or however. And they already knew it because I had modeled it and I had shown them what to do and they were doing it along with me. And then as I'm starting to let go, I start to say, okay, who remembers what are the words that we were targeting when we want to show that these two things are different? And they love to then remember those things. And we always kept like a folder and a notebook, so everything is always there in front of them. So if they can't remember, they'll go back to their previous. I'll say, well, all right, if you don't remember, where are you going to find it? Because that's a strategy to use when they're writing on their own in the classroom is, okay, how am I, I'm going to go back to my other paper. Let me look, what was that word that I used? So always, having that written word in front of them so they don't have to recall.
I love it. Is now a good time to go through a script?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
The other thing that I didn't mention
Oh,
about the
yeah.
script too before, and then I'm gonna do a script so you can kind of hear. And it sounds scripty.
Okay, that's
And
okay.
it takes a little while to get used to it. For research, it was wonderful because all the scripts were pre-planned, so that made it for a very clean study. I knew exactly what I was going to go in and say and plan. But then once you get used to doing this, it's very, very easy to do. The other piece that I didn't mention is you do have to have, and this is, what you would do as you're planning for your session anyway, is what am I going to point out here?
Okay, what?
Besides the purpose, okay, of, why are we writing, which you should do for anything, even if it's a sentence.
Mhm,
Why am I writing this? What am I trying to say? That's always going to come up. The second piece is, and this is going to be dependent on who you're working on, what part of the language do I really want to focus on? And you could focus on multiple things if you have multiple students you're working with that have multiple needs and
mhm,
multiple goals. So, and in the article, it breaks it down this way too. I always go back to the Fab Five. So, I could point out phonology just by talking about spelling. Any spelling thing that's in there, or if we're trying to figure out a word, or if I know a word can be spelled multiple
mm.
ways, like the word see, you could spell it C-E-E. No, you
Yeah.
don't. S-E-E, S-E-A. I may spell it wrong on purpose.
Ooh, fun.
Or if I'm starting to let go and I'll say, well, how come we wouldn't write it SEA? If I did write it SEA, what does that mean? Well, that's a thing and that's a noun. But what if I make it SEE? That's a verb. Then you get into those beautiful, there you
Mm-hmm.
go. Now you're already talking about language. So for older kids, really the thing to target phonology is spelling, because that's where you're going to see the weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Also kids who have dyslexia or dysgraphia, you're going to see those weaknesses there too. So it allows that. The other thing is, if you have kids who are speech kids, it helps bring those connections in as well, those sound writing relationships. You could talk about morphology. There's morphemes everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
prefixes, suffixes. Don't forget the morphology. I always say go back to pre-K, verb endings. What
Mm-hmm.
tense is this in? If it's an ing, what does that mean? If it's an ed, what does that mean? How do we spell it? Um, Semantics. What vocabulary am I going to use? Why am I choosing this vocabulary? What does that word mean? Semantics is also concepts. So anything school-based, you might have compare and contrast, which goes back to just basic, same and different, or problem solution, or listing things. All those, that's all a concept. And if you do graphic organizers, you can talk about those concepts. The thing I love about compare and contrast is it's same and different. That's
Mm-hmm.
a basic concept. So just go, seeing, do they even know conceptually what is the same and what is different? And then when I have to put that in the sentence, how do I convey that to somebody? Then of course you have good old syntax, and you have
Mm-hmm.
every rule under the sun, from the capital letter you start with, to the order, to the transition words, to the commas, to the tensing, to the period. You From beginning to end, from one, and I usually have them go from one end of the sentence all the way to the end. And then you have the pragmatic pieces. Did I say this in a way that's going to be clear to the person reading it? Or if it's in science, it better be very factual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to read a certain way. It's not going to be once upon a time Cinderella was in a castle. In science, you don't talk about the people. You talk about the concepts, you talk about the things. So It's all the what is going to be in there. And that, now that is a lot that I gave you, but starting out, I would pick, maybe you have a group that really needs to work on syntax, then just focus on, maybe it's just verb tenses. And you're just going to start, focusing on the verb tensing when they're writing the sentences to start small.
I like it because it's not only hearing the verb tense, but seeing it too, making more of that connection of maybe that small sound at the end, um, that makes all the difference. And when you see it in writing, it's easier almost to hear it.
Right. And
Yeah.
the great thing is when they write it, you also get to see what their process
Yes.
is. And then when they make a mistake, it gives you the opportunity to then talk about that in the moment and
Mm-hmm.
see where the breakdown is. And it's right in front of them. They don't have to remember it. And, that's why the other thing to get, I'm going back to that question, how do I get kids excited, is I need to be vulnerable myself when I'm writing so that they feel comfortable being vulnerable when they write. So I do a lot of purposeful, and sometimes I do make mistakes. It's hard to be doing all those things at the same time. But then they're more willing to do that and to understand that when you write something, you have the luxury of going back and fixing it before you turn in the final
Mm-hmm.
product, before you click send. Different than conversation where something just comes on out and then you go, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that way. You always have the time to fix it, which is a great thing.
I like that. Right? You're showing the power of writing, the purpose of writing, and the benefit of writing over speaking. Right?
Right, right. The chance to correct.
The chance to correct, which we don't always have when we stick our foot in our mouths.
No, and the other thing I find with adolescents too, and even college students that I work with, there's they just maybe they do a little planning and then they just write it and spend very little time on revising and
Mm.
editing. And a lot of kids, and I will say, I even struggled with that when I started my PhD. Like, I remember this professor was talking about his writing and how he spends like triple the amount of time editing or revising. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this wrong all along. Because it was always, oh, I have this paper due. I do the paper and then I kind of like check it and then it's done. Um, the fixing and cleaning and thinking about who's going to read it, that's really the biggest part of the process. And it's
Yeah.
the hardest part too.
It's interesting. Yeah, you're really kind of flipping the script on like,
Yes.
it's not just write, don't just write, think about it first.
Right.
Oh, metalinguistically.
Right. And during and after.
After. Yeah.
Right. All of
Yeah.
that.
All right. What do we want to do next?
Do you want me to do the script that's from the
Oh,
article so
do
you
the
can
script from the articles. That way, if those that have it, they can be following along, and those that don't, it's okay. You can listen along, and then they can go back and look at it. But yeah, I think it would be really good to kind of handhold us.
Sure. So if you are looking at the article, it's on the article page 44. It's toward the bottom. And what I did is, this is just to give you an idea of what this might sound like. So what I chose was the water cycle, which is something that students work on. I tried to do something that was really expository and very sciencey. So this just gives you an idea of what I would be saying if these students have to be doing a writing piece related to the water cycle, which is something they're working on in their science class. Okay. So the way I have it written is, so what I would say is, and usually I have, I have whatever the writing assignment is, and they can see it, I can see it. And I would say something like, okay, I'm going to say aloud what I'm thinking while I'm writing. This is how I start all these scripts, getting them back into what is this thing, this think aloud of writing. First, I'll read the writing prompt and I'm going to look for the key words. So I'm telling them what I'm thinking in my brain and I'm actually modeling this. This is a prompt from science class. It's about the water cycle. And then I have that, then I would circle the phrase water cycle in the prompt. And then, I'm thinking about, what do I know about the water cycle? So then I might write down the water cycle on the dry erase board for the students. Then I might be verbalizing, okay, what do I know about the water cycle? I know in class, okay, it's a biochemical cycle related to changes in water. So I'm always writing this down, and then they might be also writing this down along with me. So all they have to do is copy and listen. So they're going through the motions. And then I'll say something like, okay, this is everything I know, without even looking back at my book. Now I'm going to go back to the writing prompt, and I want to see what do they want us to tell them about the water cycle. And then in the prompt, it has the word steps. So I'm going to look through it. I'm going to read it. And so, okay, the word steps. Okay, what does steps mean? Steps probably means that they want me to put something in order. And then I'll write in order, and then they'll write along with me in order. Okay, that's the word steps. That means in order. I don't remember the steps. So now let me go back to my textbook, and then they'll take their book or whatever they're using. Let's go back and let's find these steps. And then we find them and we talk about a little bit, okay, where are these 4 steps? And that's where then you can segue then if you want to do like planning. So then you might be using a graphic organizer where then they would be first writing the 4 steps. And it's just me modeling exactly what I'm thinking out loud, just talking through that and letting them hear that, and then letting them see that while we're doing that. And that's pretty much all that it is just saying what they should be thinking out loud. They have this for reading. This is very popular in the reading research called think aloud, reciprocal teaching, close reading. There's one other one I'm missing. Very popular, a lot of research for that, for reading. When I read this paragraph, what am I supposed to be thinking? And reading teachers use this and classroom teachers use it all the time. They don't really have that for writing. They have, okay, here's the stages of writing, or here's a mnemonic for me to remember what goes where in the writing, but nobody really says what you should be thinking about with the language, with the writing. So that's what essentially you would be modeling. And if this is too much, you would only pick 1 or 2. Maybe it's just finding the key word. Whatever the piece is, whatever you want to target that. Or even if you don't want to do that essay, you could start with that and then let's just make up sentences about the water cycle and then target whatever their goals are. But you're still also, the great thing is you're using the academic content, so that's a review for them.
Yes.
It's overlapping with the academic. That's the other great thing about it.
I love that when you said, oh, have them bring their textbook, go into the class during lesson. I mean, it's exactly what SLPs in the schools should be doing, is academic. Because what are we here for? We're here to remove those barriers for their access to their academics. And how authentic is this? It's wonderful. And I think how powerful it is to really make us think about our thinking. That's the power there. Really think about our thinking, which I guess is your entire metalinguistic approach.
The other wonderful thing about it is then, so what I just did is all me. All right, that's all. You only do that in the beginning. And then in the article, what I have there is then how you scaffold it so that eventually they're doing it entirely on their own. And that would be just basic question hierarchy. So when I'm first letting go, I might just ask, let's go back to compare and contrast. Okay, let's look at this. Do we think this is a compare and contrast essay? Is the teacher asking you to talk about same or different? Yes or no? And that's just the first basic question, keeping it very, very simple. Then going more to WH type questions. Okay. This is compare and contrast. What is in compare and contrast? What do we need to be thinking about in compare and contrast? Those types of WH questions. Then eventually you get to say you're focusing on compare and contrast. Okay, who can tell me what this is asking for? What do we think? Is it compare and contrast? How do you know that? What key word is there? And then the other thing is too, the beauty of this is because you're talking a lot, is every time you want to get everyone participating, give everyone a turn to answer. And if you have someone that's only at that yes, no level, you're only going to ask them things that are yes or no, and keep it very concrete, very, very visual, so they're successful and they don't feel, intimidated in any way. But you might have someone in your group that is at a much higher level. And that is then when, say you're going around, you could say, okay, well, now you tell me. I love when I say, okay, here's the writing prompt, so and so. What am I supposed to be thinking? And I just sit there. And then it's funny because then if they tell me something that's a little bit off, I will do it. And then it kind of models how it doesn't work. And then we all, it's like, okay, compare and contrast. And then I start doing it. And then everyone's like, wait a minute, no, that's asking for a problem solution. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, what happened here? What did we miss? Kind of do that. What I find with older students is if they can tell you things and verbalize them, and a lot of it is the why, why am I doing that? Then I know that they know it. Is when they can actually, or tell me what to do, then I know, oh my goodness, they know it. One of my favorites is, why am I putting a period at the end of this sentence? Well, because I'm ending my thought, something like that. It takes a while for them to do it. And then it becomes automatic, and then it becomes very powerful. Like I'll ask them things I already know that they know, and they'll say it. I'll be like, awesome, you know this. See, I don't even need to tell you what you need to be thinking. You know what you need to be thinking. And then you're hoping when they're in the classroom, there's going to be a kid who writes a Jagunda run-on sentence, which is very common for our students. Maybe they'll take that pause and go, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to be thinking about that thing that in my language therapy. And they do. That was what my research showed, is with the practice, they started becoming very conscious of the things that I was making them conscious of. And then even when I wasn't there to remind them, they were reminding themselves. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process. And the nice thing is you can level it. You may have someone that, while you're talking to some of the other students, you may have a couple that you say, all right, I'm going to go over this one more time with these three over here. Why don't you start writing a couple of sentences on your own, and then let's reconvene. So that's the beauty of writing, is that there is silence. So you can, have times where kids can be kind of working on their own, and then you can maybe be doing a little more verbalization with the ones who need a little more support, and then reconvene. Or you can have the stronger students working with the weaker students. They're kind of doing a pairing there. How about you tell him what he's supposed to be thinking? Now you tell him what he's supposed to be thinking. So it's just so versatile. There's so many different things that you can do with it.
Absolutely. Right. We always, I think when we let you hit it the nail on the head when you said, when we can show somebody how to do something, we know how to do it. And then
Right.
what I also liked is when you were saying that if they tell you to do something, but it's not quite right, you do it. and they can be like, whoa, 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 whoa. It reminded me of that. I don't know. It was like a video of somebody, give me the steps of how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you do exactly when they say, take out the peanut butter, what I can't remember, but it was super funny when you do it literally. Oh, I know. Put the peanut butter on the sandwich, and then you just have the bread. You put the jar of peanut butter right
Right,
on the right.
right,
And
right.
oh, then they're like, it's fun. I think that brings the joy and excitement when you're doing it literally. If you do it literally like that, but in the writing process, and they're like, no, that's not what I meant. Oh, what did you mean?
Right. And with
Yeah,
writing, you have to be literal.
yeah,
That's where you use
right.
the word correctly, is is you have to be literal when you write. You can't make an assumption because you
That they
don't
know.
have the opportunity to correct that. So whatever you say, it has to be exactly what you mean, or the
Yes.
person. And the other thing is when you write in middle and high school, that represents your knowledge. And what's always such a struggle for our students is a lot of times they know a lot more academically and content wise, and they just can't demonstrate that. So their writing is so important
Hmm.
for their product, their demonstration of their accomplishment. And just always, bringing it back to that. You need to, you know this. We got to put it on the paper so that they know you know it.
Yeah. So, someone did throw in here, do we need a special certification to implement this approach besides what our license and certification is?
No, no, as no, and I don't mean to keep touting, the article, but I wrote it so that you could always go back. So all these things that I'm talking about, there's a lot of very explicit instruction in the article. Like if you want to talk about syntax, I and I even have the questions that you ask.
Yeah, I
You know,
love that. I
the
mean,
questions that you ask, and if it's a planning or a writing or an editing, questions that you ask, or the different levels of questions you can ask kids as you're letting go and building independence. There's table 1, table 2, and table 3. There's all different charts in there, and then I have literal questions like what you would say, and I came up with these, and that was my goal for the article, was to make it something that you can always go back to and just use. But no, it as long as you know about language, that's all that you
writing is
need to
language.
know. I mean, the other thing in the article is early on in the article, it does talk about a couple of writing interventions. There's a really great one out there called SRSD, self-regulated strategy development. And but even them, it's a great strategy, like more cognitive, for executive function, to get kids from the beginning to the end. But even in their articles they say this isn't the only thing you need. And they kept saying you need something for author's purpose, you need something for syntax, you need something really languagey. So I was like, ooh, okay, here's the thing that you pair along um, with it. So it blends beautifully with something they would be doing in a classroom that they've learned from more of a writing instruction
Right.
perspective.
I think more so, just to kind of double down on that, is this is just an approach to take to enhance your therapy, that you're already doing in language, and that sometimes that missing component is the writing piece, and we're using that as language, which actually leads us to a question that Kristen had just asked. What kind of carryover or impact do you see on students' verbal language, grammar, syntax, when you work on writing in therapy in therapy session, sorry?
Well, I one thing I can share with you, and it's not this article, it was my dissertation. This was probably what really sparked me to keep going with this, was I only was able to work with those kids for 20 sessions for 20 minutes. And
Mm.
that's not a lot of time to work on writing. So when the results came out, the actual writing things I wanted to accomplish, it didn't make that statistical significance because it was only 20 sessions. But I had given them a compare and contrast map before, and a compare and contrast map after for science concepts they had been covering all year in school. And the kids that I had worked on the writing, the differences in the maps were night and day. And that is where I was like, oh my goodness, they made the gains in the understanding of compare and contrast of the science. And the second map, the kids I worked with, they were using more specific words. They weren't, they were like, they might write something that was very, very vague. And then they were using words that really were a similarity or a difference. And that's where I said, wow, I just helped them with concept and maybe even helped them a little bit in their science. Meanwhile, I was trying to target writing, which I did see gains. It's just when you do research, there's a lot of
Mhm.
numbers and statistics. I saw differences in their writing, but so the answer is you never know what you're going to see. And the beautiful thing when you write is you're always reading while you're writing and you're talking.
Right.
So there is a number of different things that you may see. And then the other thing is, I know how hard it is to take data, especially when you're with groups. When you're writing and kids are taking notes on writing, that piece of paper, you just put in a folder, that's your data. And then when you're if say you're working on verb tensing, you could look at from the beginning to the end and eventually you have to have them do it by themselves to see without you if you see differences, but then you have it right there. You
Hmm.
have it right there. And then if you do have the ability to collaborate with teachers, you can then see if when they're writing there, if you're seeing those changes as well. So yeah, sky's the limit with gains here, really.
I love it. And I hate that we're coming towards the end. Is there anything um, we haven't quite covered yet that really is going to help our SLPs bring this back um, and to their practice?
No, I think the thing is to be okay with talking while you're working on writing, and being okay with that. Or if you've never, I found I always wanted to write and then I would freeze and then I would stick with those more conversational type activities. Just take out a piece of paper and some pencils and have them write it down. That's really the place to start and be okay with that. But it takes a little bit to get in the groove. Like even that thing I just did with the water cycle, like you
Hmm?
will get into like kind of a routine, and it's a routine. You'd say to them, okay, we're in the brain now. I'm gonna tell you, I'm telling you what I'm thinking. Okay, let's put our thinking caps on, and it becomes a routine to use, and it's just there's so much that you're going to get out of it. There's so much that you're going to get out of it. And the article really, we didn't, what one thing we didn't have time to talk about is it has everything in there. Anything that you could possibly need to target in the areas of language. There's a huge chart in there going from the within word level, like morphemes, to word, to phrases, to sentences, to full essays. And then what kind of questions do you actually ask and focus on? And that's going to be based on what are you actually writing?
And exactly what you said at the beginning, that your article is truly a tutorial. And I think it's, really important that we hear that. And what is most important, this whole conversation is that writing is language. I think that's like the takeaway. It's just, and you help remind us that writing is not separate from language. It is part of our language. Written language is part of our language. And when we start helping students really become more aware of how language works, how words, how sentence, how to organize a thought, to make sure that your point is coming across to the audience. Who is your audience? It makes them a stronger communicator. I would think
Right.
that there has to be a crossover between writing and then being a better communicator orally as well.
Absolutely. And when you're figuring out what you're going to write, you say it out loud. So if you're a
Right.
strong oral communicator, that helps with that. But then the nice thing when you're in groups is when kids are verbalizing things, the other kids are hearing it. And then because you're writing it, you're seeing it, and you're reading it. So you're always working on, those 4 processes are listed in all the state standards: listening, speaking, reading, writing.
Yep.
You're targeting all
All of them.
That's the thing I always work on writing. Even with real little kids, I was always, once I started doing this, even when I was working with kids in pre-K, if I was working on, something, I was always writing it on a dry erase board so they could see it, which then is working on the pre-literacy. And kids love writing, grabbing that marker. I'd be like,
Right.
okay,
Writing on
Miss,
the
more than
table.
one, right? Right. As long as you can clean it off.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the dry erase on the table works. We do
right,
that.
right. Windex, or,
Yep. Yep.
worse, nail polish remover, whatever. But kids really, they love seeing it. They love writing, and then it's always making that connection with literacy and sound development, and yeah.
I think it's just winning all around, doing all of that. Well, I do need to close it down. I hate it. Every time, I never want it to end. Lynn, thank you so much. Thank you not only for you being you, thank you for sharing that article, and giving us those steps. Y'all, look at that article, use it. It is amazing. So, Lynn, thank you so much for being with us and sharing everything. Thank you so much. And everybody here, the live audience, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening. Thank you, everyone, for always continuing to show up for our students every single day. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider sharing it with a colleague who maybe wondered, where does writing fit in with speech language therapy, right? And don't forget, you do earn 0.1 ASHA CEUs for completing all those course modules. So if you're live, go to Speech Therapy account, get that. All right, you guys, until next time, keep learning boldly, think critically, and keep leading with purpose. All right, I'll see everybody on the next episode of School of Speech. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.